I never felt like super at home in London. You know, Poland is a good thing. You're like, look at the last 20 years. What country grew the most in the world? China. Second. What do you think? Indonesia? No. Poland.
Wow.
So people are like, huh. So
I am now planning to have a baby soon. It's like flashback.
Congrats.
I get it.
That was a time when I was doing something I loved. I was extremely happy. I was extremely broke. I have 20 zloty in my wallet. Parents who were quite successful, they were like, nope, you're not going to be supporting yourself writing novels. In dating, same way in pitching, same way in selling, that you need to accept the 10 minutes of pain of somebody judging you way lower than you are.
We call it the golden cage. They have these big corporate jobs, make a lot of money, but still I could sense the unhappiness in. Today my guest is Maciej Markowski, a dear friend of mine that I have known for more than 15 years, and I am so glad to catch up with him and talk about entrepreneurship, fatherhood, startup, and everything in between. Thank you for supporting our show. Enjoy this episode. Maciej, welcome to the show, Warsaw Confidential.
Pleasure.
If the Polish government came today and they would say, you know, KAMAL, we love you, but you're allowed to have only one friend, one Polish friend, it's going to be you. I'm going to choose you.
I think you'll need to cut it out because you'll lose a couple of friends this way.
I know, but it's the truth. I just want to say I appreciate your friendship, your brotherhood. You've been with me in the highest highs and the lowest lows, and I'm glad to call you a friend. Welcome again.
It's mutual.
So, how are you doing? And
Much easier for me if they ask me to keep one Moroccan.
yes. Yeah, you know only know one Moroccan?
No, I know a couple more.
All right. Anyway, sorry guys for my other Polish friends. You know the drill.
I'd like to apologize to my other two Moroccan friends.
True. So how are you? How are you feeling today? What have you been up to?
Good. I'm excited. Started new business. Well, joined a new business relatively recently, so I'm very excited about that. I never know how to answer a question about how I'm feeling. I'm Polish, so I'm like, I'm good.
So actually, that's a good point, because for me, in my world, I put people in two categories. When I ask them, how are you? They're the ones that say, I'm fine, it's all good, you know. But it is not. And then the other people, they actually say, well, I don't feel good. I have this problem. So, you know me, the last couple of years, I've been, going through these hard times, and I never knew how to answer these questions, because at the beginning, I don't want to come across as a guy who's, again, complaining and crying. But at the same time, I felt I was lying to myself and to the person who was asking.
I think it depends on the context, because, like, if you asked me outside of this situation, I would be like, well, I got really sick on Tuesday. It was a shit week. My son got sick, so I had like at 3 a.m. him he's like, hey, can I sleep in your guy's bed? We were like, okay, carrying the 4-year-old. Then like the way he was sleeping, I had that much of the bed for myself, and his head on my face from like 4 till 6 a.m. But I was like, I'm in a podcast. I'm gonna say it's nice, and I started a business. I joined the business.
So that's my philosophy about the how are you, question. Now when someone asks me, I just straight up just say what I feel in that day. Like, no, I don't feel good today.
I think you're gonna scare the hell out of some Americans.
yeah.
They're like, yeah, I'm fine too. What did you say?
All right. Anyway, so I started with this funny introduction because I go back in time to 2011 where we first met, and to me, and I'm just saying this, to throw flowers at you guys, but Polish people are like one of the loyal people that I have met in my life. It's like legit, no bullshit. I've traveled around and
just say on loyalty and on Poland. I think the country's been through some horrible times. So I think generally we're very good. We're not individualistic. We're actually quite of a group. And that means if you're down, we will always help you. I think that's the good side of Polish people. The bad side is if you suddenly succeed, there will be a bit of like pulling down, I think. So there's a lot of like, we want to make sure everyone's okay. If somebody's not okay, we're going to pull them up. If somebody's better than okay, we'll be like, So I really try not to be this way. And I remember a time maybe 10 years ago where I was doing almost like a selection of friends. I was like, okay, who's genuinely happy that I succeeded, and who I can see like some pain underneath. And I think that's difficult. Like in US, like you succeeding, everybody loves you. If you're down, like, oh, I forgot your phone number. Here is opposites in a weird way. But speaking about how we met, yeah, look, I met a lot of people in my life. I don't think I have a better story in a way. So a good friend of mine, of ours actually, took me to a house party where her ex-boyfriends lived, and he was late to a party. So it was nice. I was chatting with everybody, and she was back from, I think, France at the time, and because she used to live in Poland, an Indian girl, and she was like meeting everybody. It was very nice. And suddenly her ex-boyfriend showed up, and he, for whatever reason, he thought like I'm now dating her and that I took her from him or something. He started screaming like white on the face that you have to leave, I don't want you in my house, like shaking. And the funny thing, I had it since like very little. I get very calm in crisis, like just complete, like all emotions just get parked for later. So I remember holding his two fists like this, and I was like, okay, it's okay. 5 minutes, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and I'm out. Just,
relax.
Easy. So I remember going back to the kitchen, and somebody started pouring shots, and I left, and you left with me. Yeah. And half the party left, because they were like, this dude is cuckoo. And so I remember we ended up partying. I think we went to Jesus in Klava.
Yeah, it was
what a club.
Oh man.
And I remember you were like dancing and approaching girls, and I was like, finally somebody who's not afraid of the world.
Yeah.
And I think we ended up going with Avani to the three of us to some bar or something, and we were at a cafe, and we were chatting, and I was like, what a great guy. And then I think we connected on some social media, and months later, like 3 months later, you had a problem with, you had those sometimes, right? With the, you had to submit like to stay longer in Poland.
Yeah, true.
And foreign languages are foreign to people who work there. So you took me as a translator, and I tend to be quite assertive in those situations. So we had a good time. It was during Ramadan, I remember also. Oh, man. So then we were sitting in a park chatting, and you were like, a drink would be nice. It was the time when Ramadan was in July.
I see. Oh, boy. That's the golden era, man. This episode is sponsored by Meknes, a brand where Moroccan craftsmanship meets modern luxury. For our Warsaw Confidential listeners, you can enjoy 15% off your purchase by using the code Warsaw15 at checkout, meknes.com. Thank you for supporting our show, for listening, watching, and subscribing. So exactly now, back to that time around, 2012, we started, going out, going to opera club and, having fun, approaching. But at the same time, I was, starting my online, empire, I would say. Was it at the same time? Because for me, the moment I remember is when we were in, what's this club? This crazy one, huge one, where we were getting both notifications,
Oh, yeah, Space.
Space, oh, man. That club, we were like, I remember, because, I say you're like a dear friend of mine, because we shared so many things together. And that was like, it's still in my, because I think it was like the beginning of the era of, the internet. We had like internet on the phones. So it was like all constantly, connected, and you could see this PayPal notification.
Yeah, it was relatively new.
Yeah. And they're like, oh man, I just get a book. And they're like, yeah, me too. And I just missed those times. So talk to me about that writer era. The novelist, Maciej Markowski, the novelist.
The starving era.
Well, I think all writers would agree with you.
Yeah, well, not all. Some do well. Not many.
Yeah, well, like 0.
I mean, it was a dream of mine. I learned how to read and write. I was like 3 or 4. My grandfather taught me. I remember reading book. I think my mom still has like a 25 book about pirates I wrote when I was 6, maybe.
Wow.
And I just loved it. I was like football and novels. That was my whole thing growing up. And I was dreaming about it. And my parents, who were quite successful, they were like, nope, you're not going to be supporting yourself writing novels. So it was a lot of conversations like that. And I was writing, and I was like, nah, that's never going to work, and la la la. And I remember in 2008, I was running this small recruitment company, and from day to day, I was just like, screw it. I always wanted to write. I dropped everything, and I just started writing. I like literally day and night. I think in the 6 weeks, I had a first draft, and it took a little while to correct it. 2009, the book obviously got rejected by like every publisher I sent it to. One responded with a no, which was a success because they responded. And then finally one accepted it. And they were like, well, if you choose us, I was like, well, not a big choice, is it? So long story short, first book came out 2009. I think second came out in 11. That's when we met. And you became my idol actually, in a way, like I don't know how much you felt it. That
no, I do remember
because I was so my first book came out. I almost start. I'm a very analytical person, so I remember doing like a table of like how much I spent per food, brands, everything, and I went to a supermarket to optimize how I can spend the least on food. So if anybody needs to know, buckwheat, carrots, and herring is how you get to your nutrition.
Okay.
With the least amount of money.
Wow.
So you can, but don't eat it too much. You get like, to this day, I'm looking at those things. I'm like, except buckwheat, I'm okay with that. But anyway, so they turned off my electricity at some point, which brings me to a fact that you should remember to throw out any herring you have in your freezer if they ever turn off your electricity. Sorry, I'm really rambling, but in a nutshell, that was a time when I was doing something I loved. I was extremely happy. I was extremely broke, and I remember getting a job as a journalist by a miracle, by just like, I have 20 zloty in my wallet. I think that's it, and I found a job like the next day. So that was like a small miracle. But I remember when I met you, and I was working as a journalist when I met you, I was like, here's this guy who has a blog, and he writes, and he does this for a living, and he has a very good life out of that. And I really, really, so many of our conversations were like me interviewing you, like, how are you doing this?
Bro.
So I remember I changed my blog, my writer's blog, in a way that you were running your website.
Value, yeah.
And I got so many tips from you on how to do this. And I was like starstruck. 2012, I remember I was like, screw it, writing doesn't work. I went to consulting. And still 2 books came out later, so I ended up with 4. But constantly I was like, this guy got it made. This guy figured it out. And I never got it to that point. So I had huge respect. And I'll never forget, because I would write to whatever like I got inspired to write about. And you were like, no, you need to pick a topic for the blog. So I did everything wrong. I listened to all your advice. I remember it 10 years later. Have I followed it? maybe I would be doing something else today.
So my close people that are around me, I usually inspire them in two ways. First, they grow a beard. And the second one, they launch a blog.
Well, I already had a blog before we met.
You did?
I did. I started in October 2009.
Okay.
But I had completely
it was just like
random. The design was just random.
I remember like giving you this coaching session. I'm telling you, man, writing a novel on stories is nice, but you gotta give some value to the readers. I was showing them how to meet women, how to talk to them. So it's like very demanding, and that's why it was working. So okay, the moment you said this writing career is not working for me, I need to do something else. What were the first steps?
It was a process in a way, because let's say seriously, I started writing in 2009. I ran out of money in like 9 months.
2 weeks.
No. I had something saved. And I kept my cost insanely low, as you heard. So I started working as a journalist. I got really inspired on how offices get designed, if they're well designed, like if they really follow the function and if they support the innovation, the collaboration, the creativity, the productivity of people. So that I ended up making it my career later on. I kept quitting jobs, writing a novel. It didn't bring money. It didn't bring big success. I was like, okay, screw it. Let's get another job. So I would quit. I think I ended up quitting my job 3 times. First, I quit this recruitment agency. I wrote my first book. Then I quit the journalistic job. I was editing this office design magazine. Then I wrote my third. Then I went into consulting. I quit my first consulting job and I wrote my 4th book, which, by the way, was the one that kind of happened because of you, because you introduced me to Maciej Markowski, and we wrote Spowiedź Selekcjonera, which was my 3 fiction novels and 1 kind of like a biographical novel. That was the last thing I've written, 2013.
Wow.
And I remember after that book came out, and I think that last book that had a chance to really be something, because we went to Dzień Dobry TVN, we went to Pytanie na Śniadanie, but the publisher just screwed us up because the book was coming out 2 weeks after we were on TV. I have received so many emails telling people, where can I get this book? Yeah. And it was impossible to find my email online. So it was such a wasted opportunity. I think this book could have been really, really big. But I mean, it still was okay. It was still the book that sold, not the best of my books, but not the worst either. Okay. I worked in HR, then the recruitment, then the journalism, and the consulting. So it was not like I'm stopping writing and there's a desert. I have never done anything else. I don't have that situation. So I was like, okay, one day I want to have a family. I have clearly not made it to a place where I can support myself with writing novels. So let's do something. I've been dating this Danish girl at the time, so I decided, okay, let's see if it can work. So I moved to London, and London was a great place to find consulting work for workplace strategy for what I was doing. So yeah, and I remember very clearly when I was like 29, when I felt I gave it all to writing. I really did. There's 4 novels with my name on in NP. And sitting there, and I am nowhere near being able to support myself doing this, not even close. And I was like, okay, let's be an adult about it, and let's do something that actually pays the bills. And I remember my first salary in London, and I looked at the pay slip, and I was like, oh, I think that's more than I earned from 4 novels combined in a month.
Wow.
So I was like, well, I guess I'm an adult now.
So I want to talk about the psychological aspect of that decision, because it's not easy to just say, because I assume you love writing as I do, as much as I do. And I've been struggling with this when I've seen the blog world coming to an end because I've seen it coming,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, fuck, I can't do this anymore for a living, and it was breaking my heart. So tell me about that, psychological aspect that you had to give it up, so you can, like, how was the switch?
I think number one, you need to be honest with yourself, so you kind of have to look at yourself as you're another person. So you're like, you look at this guy, how he's doing, how everything's going. If you were a betting man, and that's sort of how I look at life, as probabilities. So like, what is the chance that this guy will really be able to support himself and a family one day from novel writing? And if you're like 3%, you're like, well, that's not the odds I like. So it was very much like, have I gave it all? Yes. Have it gone? Is there progress? Yes, sort of. But is it like really fast enough progress that there's no starvation on the way? No. And I quite enjoyed this consulting bit. I liked you need to do interviews, you need to do surveys, you do this observational studies, you arrange it all. It's like this huge project to really understand how an organization is functioning. And I like this. I was like, I'm quite good at it. I ended up doing all those projects. Sorry, I don't know how much I answered your question, but I think it's just you look at yourself like metaphorically in a mirror, and you're like, is this working? And I do believe you need passion, perseverance, and I ended up launching startups in later on, which is another thing with a failure rate of 95%. Which people say that's a high failure rate. I was like, I was writing novels, so it's 10 times lower failure rate than that thing. I was like, I'm moving towards certainty.
Well, actually, good that you mentioned, because I'm going to tell you, maybe you know the story. So, because I got approached in 2010 to publish a book because my blog was very popular.
He is there.
One of them. And then the publishing house, which is the biggest in France, they told me, okay, here's the book, sign here. And I glimpsed at the contract and I've seen 2%. And I'm like,
what's up?
What's up with this 2%? It's like, I wrote the book. They're like, yeah, but you just write, we promote, blah, blah, blah. And after 1 month, they sent me like a check of, 120 euros or something. I'm like, nah, this is not, and now I can say it because the contract is up. So what I did, I took the very same book, I transformed it to an ebook, I changed the title, I added some stuff, and I started...
Frankly, if your contract was not covering ebook, you were fully... you had a right to just throw an ebook.
Yeah.
This is... I had this with one publishing house. Sorry, I mean
go for it.
The contract was that they get money from the physical
one,
and I get from ebook. I earned most of the money selling ebooks.
So for me, I was selling this book like 30 euros, and I was like selling 100 a month, but that book was just like prestige. But every year I would get the royalties. It's just like 500 euro. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Well, welcome to my life. From that time.
I do feel your pain. Okay, now we're gonna switch a little bit gears. So how do you think you grow from this experience of shedding Maciej the writer? Because it was like a part of your personality.
It didn't happen. Life is not a movie. It wasn't like and gone. I remember being in London and working in consulting, and I was still writing my writer blog on the side, and so it continued for like 3 more years. It was doing quite okay. I would every once in a while write something. I would still be reading novels like crazy. I mean, I'm to this day, I'm a guy who reads 60 books a year, but ish. Sometimes more, sometimes 50-ish. But I was still hoping this will happen, like one day it will happen. And I remember still in those consulting days, I would look at my savings, not like people are like, oh, I can get a car, I can get something. I would be, no. From 2009 till 2015, anytime I look at my saving account, if I quit my job today, how many months I can support myself with this. And And I must have taken, I don't know, every fifth shower I would be taking, I would with like a piece of soap on a glass. I would write like, okay, I have that much. I save that much, divided by my costs. Okay, I have 56 months. Okay, which is why I was able to quit my job so many times, because I've learned this. Okay, you don't spend, and then you can actually be free. Because for me, at the time at least, freedom was the only thing worth spending money on.
I agree. So tell me about like being a Pole in London. How was that?
It was okay. It was funny because so you learn. First thing, I would introduce myself as Maciej, and after you hear 70th time, Maciej, magic. You're like, fuck that. I'm Maciej from now on. Which is why when we were starting this interview and you were asking Maciej or Maciej, I had like helicopters in my head from Vietnam. I'm like, no,
okay,
let's not do magic again.
PTSD. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one thing. Second, I remember having a folder in my inbox for all the misspellings of my first name and surname. Somehow the R from my surname would land in the middle of my name often. Or they would switch Maciej.
The butchering your name.
That's normal. Spending first 2 minutes of every meeting explaining, and at some point just going, it basically means Matthew. And to this day, I have all those like small jokes you make. I was like, Maciej, yeah, I know. My parents didn't consider my international endeavors, and the Brits laugh, and I'm like, yeah, it's a joke I do 7 times a day. I don't think I felt like I was discriminated, except maybe a couple of times. Where I had a manager in my first job in London, who I think he was an army officer. It was funny. The guy was like for 15 years in the army. He was in Iraq. He was in Afghanistan. He was in Sierra Leone. He did like crazy dude, 2 meters high and a huge dude. Everybody was like, it was good things and bad things. Everybody was afraid of him in that team because he's very rude. He writes 1-sentence emails. I'm like, that's a Polish email. I like him. He's to the point. But on the other hand, I think he was a bit threatened because, he was all those consultants with a business background, and he knew how to build a base in the desert, but maybe less so how to actually consult, I don't know, JP Morgan on how the offices should be. Like, so he would tell me, oh, will not be leading this project because your English is too poor, which I don't think it was. And the funniest thing was I left that job. There are just moments of satisfaction in life. This is in my top 10.
All right.
So I left that job. I went to another consulting company, and that client put on a huge project. It was in I think I can say this. It was in the Gherkin. It was like half the Gherkin. This famous skyscraper in London. And I pitched against that guy, and I took that project. So I was like, poor English, my ass. so that felt good. So when the Brexit vote happened, which is, I was still living in London at the time, right? There was one of the things that made me leave, actually. I was like, well, you don't want EU.
Was it 2016 or?
I was in London 13 till 16. So then the attitudes changed because people started thinking, oh, I'm not the only racist around. So then you would start hearing people in the buses of like, you freaking Eastern Europeans, like go home and stuff. It's fun, and you would hear it from the funniest of people. You'd see like a black lady shouting at some like Polish family or a Romanian family.
The irony.
Which I was like, okay, maybe it's actually the way. If you experience something, then there's a higher chance you do it yourself. So I was like, on one hand, I was like, well, on the other hand, I was like, oh, there must be, pain to cause this kind of action. But it was quite okay. I mean, British society, it is quite closed. I don't think most of my friends were actually international. So I had flatmates from like Germany, Israel, India, Bulgaria, Denmark, somewhere. But by the way, I had a German friend with whom we had the worst jokes ever. So for instance, he says, I'm going to visit you in Poland, like spontaneously. I was like, that's the best spontaneous German decision since 1939. And all our friends would be like, oh my God.
Oh, you're like too far, too soon. Yeah.
Or he would say, so there's a German, Jewish, and a Polish guy in an apartment. And he would be like, that sounds like a beginning of a joke. I was like, yeah, maybe you as a German should not be making that joke. But so long story short, I think London, I had a very strong love and hate relationship with the city. Parks, people, like the ambition in the people who moved there. The libraries, this bookstores. Well, you can see me in books. But it's an amazing city because it's one of those, like New York, London is one of those places where all the ambitious people go. So everybody you speak with, you're like, that's an impressive person. That's amazing. So that's great. On the other hand, it is a quite closed society. So when everybody was like, Brexit will not happen, I'm like, I'm doing projects all over London. All over UK. You go to like Sheffield or Manchester or somewhere, I don't think they're that happy with this country becoming international as you think they are. Mm-hmm. So I was not surprised when the Brexit happened, actually. It was a good experience to live abroad.
So when you were there, would you ever consider like living there forever?
I did consider, I was really worried. That was my biggest worry, that I come back to Poland and in consulting, I will not do anything interesting because you are there, the projects I did there, Swiss Re, JP Morgan, HSBC, AstraZeneca, I mean, global amazing companies that are either their HQ is in London or it's an American company, but their HQ for Europe is in London. So you end up doing projects on like the highest level, like with Unilever, for instance, the concept of lab of the future. I mean, how awesome is that, And no offense to anybody, I come back to Poland, if I do a project for Unilever, it'll be like, well, we have this office here that handles sales. And so I was considering it, but I remember coming back to Poland after I decided to move back. But one was Brexit. My dad wasn't too well, and I remember coming back to my apartment. It was like my books in place, and I remember laying on the bed on the first day I was back, and having this huge sense of relief and of being at home. So I when I came back, I was like, okay, I'm very happy. I came back because I never felt like super at home in London. And one thing is, it's like a revolving door city. So my best friend is this German guy and this Indian guy. Oh, he's back in Mumbai and he's back in Düsseldorf. Okay, let's make some new friends. So you're on this constant carousel of people coming and going, and I pretend to be extrovert, but I'm actually quite introverted. So I'm a person who has like very strong friendships with some people. And if those people go, I'm a bit like, So that was a big thing that didn't work for me in London. So I was considering it many times, but I managed to get a job out of a UK company into Poland. So I had a boss in London. I ended up doing projects all over this region, actually building a team. So the time just after I came back from London, it was some of my most fun times I ever had.
So you came back to Warsaw, Poland, and here you are doing projects and everything. And did you notice like something has changed?
Oh, Poland is hell yes. No, it's not like after I came back. It's not far from Warsaw to London, so I would fly back every 3 months, and every 6 months I'd be like, holy crap. we have cafes now. It's like, they discovered kombucha.
Yeah. Okay.
It was, I was born here. I'm from Warsaw, 1984. And I remember waiting in line with my grandfather in like 87, 88 to get some fish, for 3 hours in a line because we were a poor country where people were like maybe not starving, but severely malnourished. In the 80s, I even in my family, you have people who were born in early 80s or late 80s, and the people who were born in late 80s are taller. As kids, they just got more proper food. It's been hardcore. So Poland was changing insanely. I have these flashbacks. Like I remember being in Croatia in Zadar 10 years ago, or in Sofia in Bulgaria maybe 6 years ago, and going to like a worst part of town by accident. And I would be like, that's 1991. I remember. I remember being in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, which is, talk about exotic trip. And I would be like, I understand how this city is built. Because USSR had an idea of how to build a city with parks, and there were some good things. Everything was bad, but there were some good things. And I felt like this is the frozen in time part. So Warsaw is a different place every 2 years. Like, you need to watch those movies when around Palace of Culture. There was the biggest bazaar in Europe in the 90s.
In Europe?
It was before your time. But you would like the whole area from like Rotunda till Intercontinental would be covered as a bazaar.
Wow.
I need to find some YouTube videos.
Yeah, that would be nice. I know that the stadium had to, where they built the new stadium.
That was maybe that was the biggest bazaar then, because they tried to clean up the area around the Palace of Culture, and they moved them all to the stadium, it was fun. That was a great place. You would go to the stadium and you would understand what is the next wave of immigration, because initially it was the Vietnamese, then it was Chinese and Nigerians. And you would be like, you would go to the stadium because, you arrive in a country, you have no job. You just go and you're going to be hustling.
I see.
And
interesting.
It was pretty cool. You could see like, oh, this is the next wave. That is coming.
Now, Warsaw is, sometimes when I'm walking, I'm listening to my podcast. I mean, not mine, but others' podcasts, or just listening to music, I cannot help but just smile and say, we live in a great city, like the cleanness.
Even since you came, it changed so much.
Oh, no. I mean, we're not going to go back there because I'm going to start crying. But back then, it was just like, just get out and like feel it's different. It's another timeline, it's another universe. But still, till this day, I think Warsaw is one of the greatest cities in Europe that one can live in.
I'm so happy, to A, to hear it, and B, that it happened, because it was a shithole. It was so beautiful before the war, like you can see that. Like if you want to get me annoyed or unhappy, is just show me the pictures of Warsaw before the war, because we were turned into a parking lot in the Second World War, and we're kind of back in a way, and it's amazing, and you start seeing Warsaw in those rankings of like best cities to live in. And I'm remembering this gray sky from like those coal electric plants and like no food and just dull faces, like 7 restaurants in the whole city,
That's what makes it, this powerfully beautiful city, because it's like a phoenix, it came back from, and like it's for me, especially when the weather is nice outside and you see the parks and I just love it. It's like the sense of gratefulness, fill my heart, and it's incredible. So anyway, enough throwing flowers to the city of Warsaw. The mayor has to pay to sponsor us, guys.
Let's throw some more. I'm from Warsaw, so I'm very...
Well, for me, if you want to like one last flower. One last flower. For me personally, I don't think I would be the man that I am today hadn't I, moved to Warsaw, because I have to go through so much. It was like, in the beginning it was easy, but, thanks to people like you and, and the guys too here, like the loyalty, the professionalism, and I don't know how to put it, because it sounds bad saying that we don't have these things in my country, but I
really have different things.
It's like I'm trying to explain it in a diplomatic way, because in Morocco, like, everyone is so easygoing, it's just like when it comes to work, for example.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Okay. You see the bag here. When I started the company Meknes, it was actually, the idea was import-export. And I went with the prototype and everything, and I said, and because I kind of became a little bit Polish in my way of working, to me, it's like, okay, I tell you next week I need to see the first prototype. It means next week I need to see the prototype. And then I go, he's like, baby, look, the son, you want some tea? Relax. He calls his son, hey, come on here, sit down. Where is this prototype? Next month, okay, And I was like so shocked. I'm like, what are you talking about? I need my goddamn prototype. And then I stopped myself. I'm like, it's not Poland anymore. Okay. And
I think we're okay. There's there's like a whole scale of this. I believe so. Even UK is in a different place. Like and then there are people, right? And I'm from a family where if you say you're going to do this, you are going to do this. It has
to be done.
Like my partner Anya, she's from a family where it's like it's okay to sometimes excuse yourself, like to be late somewhere. Where my family was like completely like no matter what. I remember even in London. I remember I had this presentation for the CEO of this large advertising company. I had 40 degrees fever. And I would be like, and they were like, "Oh my God, you cannot go." I'm like, "No." It's like,
here I am.
Like, the meeting is set. What do you mean? So I remember to this. It was so funny. I presented. It went very well, and then I had to sit down for Q&A, and they had air conditioning high in the room, and I had such high fever. I started to like shake, like I couldn't stop it. So I put my hands under my ass and like press myself against this. I'm like, okay, now they cannot see. I'm like,
wow,
shaking.
That's some dedication, my friend.
So it's stupid, and I mean it's great, but it's stupid. And so many. I remember I would agree with a friend I'm going to meet, and then I would show up in a state like this, and they would be like, "Why didn't you cancel?" I'm like, "Because I told you I'll be here." And they'd be like, "Dude, it'd be okay to cancel." So I think with time, I kind of grew a little bit more normal.
I see.
But for work, I'm still extremely, like, you deliver, which is probably not great for your health. But for business, you actually, I think it works very well for you because people trust you.
So that's a good point. It's a nice segue to our next topic because I want to talk a little bit about the startup. So I know from, researching this episode, I know that for you, it was this a now or never moment when you said, I have to do this startup thing? Was it like when you were like 33 or something?
43, yeah.
What year was this exact? 2017?
17, I decided. From January 18, I was alone.
So tell me about that, because I myself have some experiences with the startup world, and I can tell you I'm not cut for it. And I want to talk a little bit about investors, how to convince them, how to raise capital, all that stuff. And I'm going to share a story that rocked my world, and it's a very heartbreaking story, but with a happy ending. And I would love to have your feedback on that. So,
sure.
So now you came back, UK is behind you, and you're doing some consulting stuff. But you're like, I'm not, something was going on for sure.
Yeah, it was interesting because I came back to Poland in 2016, and I got a really cool job. That's another good story. Okay, I'll talk for a little bit, but I think it's not a bad story. So I was looking for a job out in UK because I wanted to go back to Poland, but I was afraid I'm gonna do a job that I will want to kill myself. So I ended up pitching a lot of like those consulting firms in UK, like, hey, do you do business in Central Eastern Europe, the fastest growing economy? Like, Poland is a good thing. You're like, look at the last 20 years. What country grew the most in the world? China. Second. What do you think? Indonesia? No, Poland.
Wow.
So people are like, huh. So that's a good pitch to tell somebody, look, we're going some nice place. And I convinced these guys from Cushman & Wakefield that they don't have a work-based strategic consulting team in Poland, so I could build that team. We agreed on a budget. I moved back to Poland. My second day in the office, they called me and they're like, So there was this board meeting and we almost doubled your budget. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, because we have new targets and you need to do double the thing we agreed on when we hired you. I like, if I win every project in Poland, if I convince people who never even heard about workplace strategy that we're going to do a project, I'm still not going to hit the target. Can I take my business card that say Head of Workplace Strategy Poland, can I put them in the shredder and print ones that's had Head of Workplace Strategy CEE? Because you have nobody here. And they were like, okay. So I ended up it was a great year actually. I ended up winning projects in like Turkey, Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, in Russia. There was still a time when, for a big British pharma company, 2017, nobody thought there would be this craziness. In Poland, obviously. And we ended up hitting this budget. So I had the time of my life, like just flying around Europe, living out of my suitcase. But then I was a partner and I realized, like, I think I was like a second or maybe definitely like in the 5 youngest partners in Europe at a time. Another one was also in Poland. He's the CEO of Cushman for Poland now.
Okay.
And I was like, everybody above me is like 20 years older. Like, will I be doing what I'm doing for 20 years? It's fun, but I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. And I met this guy who was running a software house, Marley Fabisiewicz. Software house was called Upnex, and he was doubling in this project called Space OS. They had a first implementation in New York. Very cool. And I met them. I was like, guys, this can be a business. You need to raise funding. You need to make it big. In London, I was very lucky. I had a flatmate who ran her own business, her own startup. So I've learned like how you raise funding, how you pitch. So I sort of learned by just being in a house where the business was going. So I had a moment of truth, sort of summer 2017, when I kept pestering them. You need to raise funding. I was their advisor. And they were like, well, if you're so smart, then join it and do it. And I was like, holy crap, maybe it's not a bad idea. And me being me, I did this table of like pros and cons and everything. And I realized it's like a fake risk. Because we did agree on a salary. It was lower than my partner's salary consulting, of course. But it wasn't like horrible. If it fails, it's like somebody paid for my MBA because I need to learn how to run a business. And if we succeed, then hell, we succeeded. I had no kids. I had no family yet at the time. And I was like, it's a fake risk. Everybody's like, yeah, but startups fail. I'm like, yeah, but if it wins, it's a huge win. And if it fails, I'm still ahead. And I'm coming back to consulting as somebody who actually understands technology more than anybody else. So everybody was like, yeah, but how did you make this decision to leave consulting? It's such a risky decision. I was like, no, it's not. If you are afraid to tell people you failed doing it, yes, with your reputation or like your face is everything. But if you look calmly and coolly at it, there's no risk at all. There's a huge upside, and the downside actually has an upside. So that was a relatively easy decision. But then, what nobody told me about, this was the most stressful experience I had.
So tell me about this first. I'm going to put it like this. I'm going to tell you my story, and then you will take it from there. You will tell me what I should have done. Not. So there's this guy, he reached out to me. He's like, Kamal, we love this mechanism. It's amazing. You should talk to investors. I'm like, oh, and we launched the brand through Kickstarter. And I'm like, sure. Well, I never pitched to anyone, the very first time. And then he set up the meeting with this investor. Okay, sounds good. Put on my suit, my pitch deck, everything, happy days. And then I went to the meeting. And the guy canceled. I'm like, sorry, I have to go to Portugal. I cannot make the meeting today. I'm sorry, bye. And I'm like, okay. I'm there with my suit, in this conference room looking around. And, all right, that's fine, all right. So I go, about my day. And then he comes back after a week again. He's like, hey, let's meet here. Monday, 9 a.m., this hotel or whatever. Okay. I show up. He's not there. I'm like, okay. The third one is the charm, I'm keeping this cool thing and I'm doing it. And again, we set up a date and I went to the meeting. He was there. He came to me. He's like, I know this sucks, but I cannot do the meeting today. I have to go to Portugal, do some biking.
Biking.
And I'm like, I looked around. I'm like, there must be some camera here. Or something. This gotta be. I'm like, you're here. At least just fucking give me 5 minutes.
Get in a taxi.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
To the airport. Let's do it.
But a voice inside me was like, nah, I am not, And then I actually start reading. I think it was you or Munir. No, Munir recommended me this how to pitch.
Pitch anything.
Pitch anything. It was you. It was you. And I read it and I'm like, oh, that's why. So I don't know if you remember in the book, in this chapter, it was like he walked to an investor and the investor was eating an apple and he's like fucking grab it and it's like, nice apple. And then he set up the whole frame. So for me, after that investor meeting, I was just like, you know what? I am not good for this. I'm not going to fucking beg people for money. I'm going to do it myself. And that's when I went to Morocco and we did the TV show Dragon's Den. And, the rest is history. So my question to you is like, how do you, let's imagine some people are now like, they have ideas. They want to start a startup. They want to pitch to investors. How do you go about it? Without, because for me, I felt humiliated and I never wanted to do it again.
Yeah. Well, you cannot feel that.
Well, I thought,
No, but it's I'll do you'll cut it. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I think let's look at make this, right? Like, let's really, and I'll shut up or we cut it out. Yeah. But I think, because I think it could have been a business, because you know how to do marketing. That's a short story of it. You managed to raise funding on Kickstarter twice.
True.
It's not easy. I don't think there's
I was the first fashion company from Poland to raise capital in Kickstarter.
There you go. I don't think I would not be surprised if there's less than 10 people in Poland who ever raised twice on Kickstarter. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if there's...
Proud of this man.
I would not be surprised if there's less than 100 in Europe who raised twice from Kickstarter. I think that's pretty incredible. I think this is really incredible. So you could, if you want a business, run Kickstarter consulting, you're fine. And I remember the companies you hired to do some Kickstarter consulting, they were so crap that I think you could have done way better. So that's number one. Two, I think you probably needed hire some people at some point. Or say here's 10%, but you are now responsible for design. Here's 10%, you're now responsible for logistics and operations. Well, that part eventually did. But I think that was one problem. Thirdly, I remember when your masks started selling. And I remember us walking here, okay, how much you charging? What is the cost of this, of this, of this, of that? And I was like, dude, are you earning money?
That's the hardest lesson I learned.
So I think Excel was the one thing that was missing. And the number 4 is how you approached fundraising. Also the factory had, that's a problem. You were small potatoes for them.
Yeah, of course.
And I think the fact that you convinced them to do this.
Yeah, well, now we don't.
Decent price.
Yeah.
So that's a crazy thing. You did so many of the hardest things.
True.
That people fail at. You did them amazingly. And the things that are like bread and butter of running a business, you'll be like, nah, it's gonna take care of itself. Yeah. But fundraising wise, I think number one, this is not a business that you pitch VCs. VCs need to see something that can scale. You need 90% of margin, 85% of margin, which is normally software businesses, the only thing that can deliver it. So you would need industry people, And you're telling me about like one investor who was, if you only have one investor and and they cancel, you're like, for fuck's sake. If you have, when I was first fundraising we pitched 80 investors before we finished the round. So if you have 6 pitches in a day and the middle one drops off, it's not a tragedy. You're like,
thank God.
I'll have lunch.
Yeah.
So you just need to throw the net really wide and qualify. It's like a sales funnel. Enterprise sales and fundraising from VCs is the same thing. You throw broadly, then you qualify, and you're like, okay, we pitched today I have a list of like 240 VCs that I pitched in my life. It's a long list. We raised, by now I raised probably 13.5 million euros from investors for those 2 startups together. But it was a lot of pitching. So if you pitch, if you have a round, let's say you need to pitch, 80 is a bit crazy. It was also a first round. So let's say you need to pitch 50, 60. Out of that, 15 will be like, you know what? I'll take it to investment committee. We'll speak with an investment manager. Out of that, 6 will go to due diligence. Out of that, maybe 4 will go to deep due diligence. Let's say 4. Out of that, you get 3 term sheets. And after negotiations, maybe you're left with 2 term sheets.
So there's like a number game, you're saying.
Well, yes and no, because you still need to have a good pitch. You need to, the pitch deck needs to have, market size, why you're going to win, unique selling points. We could do a whole freaking series of
episodes. I know. I could see the excitement.
But in a nutshell, you taught dating, if somebody would tell you, I like this girl, she doesn't know me, and I'm trying to set a date with her, you'd be like, go to a club, approach half of it. You
cold approaches.
I'm not saying it's even or I don't know, Tinder, and just get to a lot of dates, and then you'll find somebody who's right for you. Don't obsess over that one person before you know them. Once you're dating, it's okay to obsess over somebody. Before, it's stupid. So I think that's the same with investment. You just really need to also find a good match, because the guy liked you. But he was like, do I invest in fashion? So for him, it was completely outside of his regular thing.
Probably. I think you know him.
Let's spare him. But if you meet somebody who invests in fashion, you'll be like, okay, you're in his diary, Yeah. You'll be like, okay, true. I have a funnel, things are moving, I need to meet you this week.
So what you're saying is the first step is to really find the perfect investor that you would listen to.
Well, there's no perfect. Even people who will give you money, they're not perfect. But find somebody who's a match.
So tell me about the startup life. You are the CEO. You were the CEO of Space OS, and now?
Yeah, Space OS was a whole... so I was a CEO, then I was a chief revenue officer, then I was a co-CEO.
So you sold that startup?
We sold it last year to an Australian company.
And then you got acquired...
Yeah, so we got acquired. So we were acquired by this company called Equium. I stayed till end of the year in the new role as a chief growth officer of this global company, which was very fun. But it was the startup I've been advising forever. And then when I said, well, I sold the startup, I'm not sure this is, I'm enjoying everything fully. They were like, stop advising, join us. So this seems to be how I find
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to say.
Recently. Since January, again, I'm a CEO. We just finished a funding round. So
congratulations.
That's fun.
No Portugal biking, no. No. So tell me about this. Why did you, because I know the story a little bit. So you got acquired and then you had this big corporation. Was this a corporation or still a bigger,
like a scale up?
Yeah, exactly. And you didn't like it because you felt like you are in the...
it's complicated. The people are good. We was just a very different culture, I think. We were like direct, quick decisions, very focused on growth. And they had a very different style. And I wish them super well. I have a lot of shares there still. So I hope they do very well. and I'm sending them leads and making sure they do well. But what's it?
The switch I want is like, why did you? Because many people that I know, especially my friends, they are like in this. We call it the golden cage. They have these big corporate jobs, make a lot of money, but still, I could sense the unhappiness in their. Was it just?
I think you just need to figure out how much money you need. You know, and what is your goals really? I think we spend too little time thinking what is really work. Like if you have 6 months to live, what would you do? If anything you work on succeed, what would you do? So that's a bad question for me because I would probably write novels.
Yeah.
But you ask your questions and that kind of unearths this truths about you. And I think that's and we don't do it, you know. And when you say golden cage, it's not the company that creates this golden cage. You create it because you end up. So this, and I guess I'm a little bit I have a relatively large mortgage. I have a family, so I kind of built this
Cage.
parts of that golden cage. But before that, I was explicitly out of that cage, right? I was like, how many months do I have to survive if I quit today and write the next book? Because I was earning this, I was like, okay, I'm saving half of it. So, you know, if you're able to live on a half of your salary, that means you have freedom to choose any other job that pays, you know, between 50 and 100% of what you're earning right now. So I think that's the whole thing. That's the thing with, like, for instance, lawyers they earn. It's a very hard job. I think you need to be extremely focused reading those documents. A lot of it, negotiations are fun, which I probably, if I were a lawyer, I would love that. But like correcting documents, you want to shoot yourself in the face. But you know, you see those people and they're like, you know, Xenia, Rolex, or Patek. Yeah. If this is how you spend your and the holidays here, holidays there, I don't think those things like make you happy, you know. So I think that's sort of, if you realize, well, I can do so. If I give up those things, then I can do something else. But it's all complicated because you end up with friends who also spend this same amounts of money, and you are like comparing yourself, and then you go to, I don't know, Mallorca instead of Mykonos. Okay, Mallorca is actually very nice.
Yeah, it is.
Which is maybe the point. But you go to a place that is equally nice, but maybe it doesn't have this crazy status like Mykonos. And everybody's like, oh, you didn't go to Mykonos. Then you know you're kind of held hostage in this lifestyle.
True.
I don't know. You just need to figure out what's important for you. Everything has a price. You launch a startup. I don't think it's for everyone. That's number one. I think I have a very high risk tolerance. I think like my co-founder, the original founder of SpaceOS, I think it got to him much more than to me. And most of my stress was his stress on me, you know. So I think it's hard. It's hard, and particularly if you have an ego. You mentioned this thing with pitching investors. It even changed for me. I was 33. I was okay to pitch 100 investors. Hear no from AT. Ask questions that you basically say you don't know what you're doing. I would be like, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing, so I'm not offended. Let's carry on. But today I'm turning 40 this year. 39 today, and I do see myself pitching a client and they're like, well, I'm not sure. I don't take it as good as I used to. I'm a bit like,
is this because of the family situation? Because
I think it's I spent some time on it. So I did a lot of like Zen meditation and stuff like that in my life, and I was very focused on like killing the ego when I was in my 20s. And I think it survived till my mid-30s, that I would really not get offended, that I would be really okay to, if somebody, and also being from Poland, like, you know, like now it changed, but 10 years ago, you would go to a consulting meeting in Munich, and they would be like, the moment they hear, what's your name? No offense to German people, they would think like, oh, he's from Poland, so he's not, you know, fantastic. And that's... I liked it, and I'll tell you why I liked it.
No,
Because within 5 to 10 minutes, they will realize you're way more professional than they thought, and you're way smarter than they thought. So after 10 minutes, they're overly nice. They're like, oh shit, I made this guy a disservice. It's unfair how I treated this guy. So they will almost like,
try to
treat
be
you overly nice and overly respectful, because they will be like, I've been a dickhead the first 10 minutes. I know that.
Let me catch up.
Let me make up for it. So I would be, but in a weird way, I think it's the same way in dating, same way in pitching, same way in selling, that you need to accept the 10 minutes of pain of somebody judging you way lower than you are. And you just need to go plow for that pain. You're like, they're like, oh, and you're like, and you just ignore it. I mean, we're humans. We have those mirror neurons, so we feel that pain, but we can just park it for a moment. And then when there are two changes, you're like, okay, I went for the ice. That's why you talk about those icebreakers.
Yeah.
And then we're good. So there was a question at the beginning of my rant.
No, okay, I'm going to help you a little bit here. So if today money was no object, what would you do?
I really told you, novel writing.
Really?
Probably. I mean, I really enjoy running startups immensely. Okay. I mean, I've sold one and I'm running another one.
Yeah, no, I could tell.
There's so many people who never are like, this is my last startup. So many people, they're like,
Not
but
again.
I liked it. The fact that you build and you need to figure out and you create the structure and you build a system that ends up working without you at some point. It's immensely great. We made a lot of mistakes in the early days of SpaceOS. We had this investor who broke investment agreement. We ended up with like 7 months where I had no idea how to pay everybody's salaries. So I had like 30 days for 7 months almost in a row to figure out how, at the time the burn wasn't horrible. It was like 400,000 Polish zloty. But I was like, on the first of the month, it's like, how do I find 400,000 Polish zloty within a month? So we would convince some client to pay a couple of years ahead. We would find some angel. We would do this. We would do that. But it was like that we would got a loan from this investor. But it was like dancing on the edge of death. That investor, to protect themselves, they started threatening us with a lawsuit.
Oh,
my co-founder also went very like, we gotta fight them, which I understand, but it wasn't helping. So it was immensely stressful. I think I have very high stress tolerance, but it was the only time in my life. It was the year my dad died. It was the year my grandfather died. It was the year my mom, who was living with my father and grandma in one house, suddenly was alone in her house. Anya was pregnant. She ended up in a hospital in a pregnancy for like 4 months, and everything at once on fire. And I would wake up with like a clenched stomach, which I don't get. Wow. People are like, so I tell them how is it in my life, and they'll be like, how do you sleep? Oh, like a baby. It's fine,
So actually, that's the question. How you do it? Tell me more about this. Like,
okay,
because I want to talk about this, and I see that we are running out of time a little bit.
Okay, so I think, firstly, there is a book, and I read a lot. There's a book called, a stupid title, Dale Carnegie. It's called How to Stop Worrying. Oh. No. That's the most famous book of this guy. But it's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Exactly. I used to give out copies to stressed people in my company.
I think.
So basically, there are a couple of tricks. Number one is, what is the worst that can happen? And if you imagine the worst that can happen, and you're like, okay, I go bankrupt. I need to sell an apartment, for example. And you're like, does the life go on? Yeah. The moment you accept it, you can deal calmly with any situation. And okay, at some point we were like, sometimes the worst that can happen is worse than that, which is harder to accept. But anytime you accept the worst case, you'll be able to deal with it. So that's my biggest trick, I guess. But then generally you just need to calmly. I think we're most afraid of uncertainty and chaos. So once you're like, this is the worst, and that's fine, and this is all that I'm going to do so we don't end up on the worst, and you have a plan to like dig yourself out of the shithole, then I think your mind really focuses on what to do rather than on, oh my God, I'm in this place.
I am now planning to have a baby soon. It's like flashback.
Congrats.
I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. What I mean is I start to feel because my sister, she gave birth to a beautiful baby, Emil. And I found myself like calling FaceTime almost every day just to see him. I'm like, oh, what's going on with me here? And I know you became a father 4 years ago. 4.5. How that experience shaped you?
There's nothing like it. And you're a very warm guy, so I think you'll be a really cool
father,
cool dad. You tempered that OCD a little bit.
Yeah, it's like yeah.
You let them have those Lego balls.
yeah, in the corner,
a little bit in there. Maybe log them.
But I think you grow with that. I think you will learn how to let it go.
I think you'd be a good dad. So it's the amount of love is it's undescribable. That's the crazy thing. It's very hard to explain to somebody who doesn't have kids. Because
Piotr here was explaining to me how he was talking with his daughter, that he makes him so happy that she can talk.
Yeah,
I guess this.
Crazy.
Yeah,
so good. Like I'm when he hugs me and we talk, and his face goes close, and we hug, I'm just like melting. So the love is incomparable. Nothing you felt. Not like when you were a small kid for your parents. Maybe that's like close. But it's still higher. So it's just unbelievable. All your free time disappears. I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's possible to explain this to somebody who didn't go through this. Particularly if you don't want to like put him in a crash or something like that.
Of course.
Which Franja started going to kindergarten just before he turned 3. So he was at home until then. Your free time just goes, and they don't sleep at night, so you wake up 20 times, and you're like half alive. Like the first 6-9 months, I barely remember because if you don't sleep enough, your brain doesn't record memories as well. So it's craziness.
So would you say that
so satisfactory? There's this famous book about happiness, I think by Mr. Haidt, and it basically says there's purpose and there's like pleasure, and people need them in different proportions, and there are things that bring different things. So having a kid is something that like maxes out the purpose. You're like, there's something that's gonna be left after me. You're teaching something. Like the purpose is 100 out of 100, but your pleasure takes a hit.
I see.
I remember times so it'd be like Saturday morning. Well, I'm just gonna stay in bed and read that book.
No.
So the last 4.5 years, 99 out of 100 mornings were started the same way. First it was screaming, now it's Dad, milk. I'm like, okay. So you just give up something, but you get this huge reward.
So would you say that it pushes you even more, like at work, when you have this motivation? Or
it's interesting because I've seen this happen to people. I've seen people becoming much more organized because people would show up at work and they'll be like, I have nothing else. I can stay till 7. I don't care. I'll take a leisurely lunch break. I'll chat with somebody by the coffee machine. But particularly, I've seen happen this with mothers who are like, at 4:30, I need to be at home with my kid. And you see them like leveling up 5 levels of productivity at work because they're like, I need to finish my things by 4:30. No fucking way. I'm not back with my kid. And
Dude, you become sharp.
I was always very organized. So for me, well, not always, but since like mid-20s, I've learned. There's another book, Getting Things Done, by Mr. Allen.
All of your recommended books are somewhere here, so.
I bought some of them. Yeah. So it wasn't such a, and I was a heavily driven person. Not sure why, but even like playing football, I was like always giving it all. So same at work. So I didn't have that. I know a lot of people who are like, well, I was living my life a bit like it's a party, and now I have a kid, I need to work. I never had that. I was like, it's like this joke that when the Cardinal Ratzinger, the poor Pope Ratzinger, left to abdicated and went to retirement. And before it was John Paul was the Pope. We were like, yeah, Poles work until they die, and Germans until retirement. So I had a lot of that mentality, I think.
Beautiful. Maciej, this has been a wonderful conversation. I feel like we could keep going again for more hours. So we're going to invite you again to the show. Thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate you.
Amazing.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Warsaw Confidential podcast. If you've enjoyed our journey together and wish to support us further, please consider subscribing to our podcast and leaving us a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps in growing our community. As a token of our appreciation, we've partnered with Meknes, a brand where Moroccan craftsmanship meets modern luxury. Exclusively for Warsaw Confidential listeners, Meknes is offering a 15% discount on their exquisite collection of leather goods. To claim your piece of luxury, visit meknes.com and use the code WARSAW15 at checkout. Thank you once again for supporting both the Warsaw Confidential podcast and Meknes.